Welcome, dear listeners, to a podcast that's about to transform the way you lead, the way you grow and thrive in your life and career. Get ready to embark on a journey filled with inspiration and self-discovery. This is Afsheen, the host of the Getting Real podcast. And this season, I'm delighted to be joined by none other than my co-host, Vicki Davitashvili. Vicki?
Are you ready to embrace the joy of leadership, the power of self-discovery, and the limitless potential of your career, and ultimately your entire life? Join us on this incredible journey of transformation.
Yep, stay tuned because the best is yet to come. So welcome back, everyone, our dear listeners. My name is Afsheen Ismail-Wey, and today, again, I'm joined by my co-host, Vicki Davitashvili, and we are getting real. And today, we're getting real on the topic of overwhelm and the various moments in our life when overwhelm shows up and how to cope in an effective and empowered way so that your overwhelm can become instead a source of excitement and some moments for you to look forward to. So, Vicki, how are you doing today? It's great to see you as usual.
Oh, hi, Afsheen. Hi, everybody. It is so good to welcome you back to another conversation. So, how am I doing? I have to be honest, I had been feeling overwhelmed. There is just a lot happening in my life, both at work and in my life. I was sharing with you that we're moving homes. We're going to have a really big birthday party coming up. At work, there's just so much happening. There are self-reviews, evaluations, projects coming up, new initiatives. So life can tend to get very overwhelmed. And by the way, I'm launching 2 new businesses. I know I didn't even share that with you yet. So I have been I've been busy. Out of that busyness, I've definitely felt overwhelmed. And I was talking to somebody and I was sharing how, all of this, and I was like, oh my God, all of this is happening for me. And it's almost like I don't even have a choice. It just happens for me and the universe is making it happen, right? And the guy kind of stopped me and he said, well, Vicki, you do always have a choice, and you do always have a choice in what you're going to lean into, how you're going to lean into it, and what you want to tackle. And I really had been feeling a lot into this notion of overwhelm and then the choice, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you take the two and put them together so that you can make 1 + 1 = 20? So I'll give you a very practical tool that I've kind of started to do. And this is an inner journey that I've been on in the last couple of weeks. And the inner journey has been that yes, I have a ton to do. I've started a new system. I created index cards because I'm one of these people who is constantly coming up with ideas. And the sheer amount of ideas that come through me actually overwhelm me. That's what overwhelms me, is that I'm like, and this is a brilliant thing, and that's a brilliant thing. Everything feels brilliant to me and like something I really want to do, and there's like all this passion around it. So for this multi-passionate entrepreneur / idea generator at work, that's what becomes super overwhelming. So I've started to just document my ideas. And this is actually giving me a tremendous amount of peace because number one, I put it down somewhere and I no longer need to ruminate on it in my head and be like, oh, I got to remember that, right? So I'm putting it down. So that's really helping that sense of overwhelm. The other thing that it's doing for me is I now can sit and flip through all of these index cards and I can be like, oh, this still feels really good to me, right? 3 days later, this still is something I want to follow through on. And so this has been giving me a tremendous amount of peace and a way, an outlet for me to at least jot down all the ideas and things that I either have to do or need to do. So that's been really helping me. And the next thing I'll talk about is prioritization, but I don't want to do that until I hear your thoughts, Afsheen. I definitely want to hear about overwhelm, what's coming up for you? How are you tackling it? And let's, I feel like this is one of these episodes where we can talk about overwhelm, but also what are some practical things we can do to help ourselves to empower ourselves, right? Because we always do have a choice, and we always do have the power over how we respond and react to a life circumstance. Because as Eckhart Tolle would say, it's just a circumstance. It just is. It's the meaning that you assign to something that gives it the perspective with which you look at that circumstance. Over to you, my friend.
You are so full of wisdom and so many wonderful tools and ideas. I love it. And I already feel a little bit less overwhelmed just by listening to all of your suggestions and your ideas. Like, oh, wonderful. That's something I could do, or that's something I should think about and try to do. And I guess, okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of a back step, because for me, what overwhelms me, since hearing what you shared in terms of what overwhelms you, what overwhelms me are things that are not designed by me, but not entirely designed by me. And as a word that you kept saying was happening. So sometimes things do feel like they're just happening. And so I think it's really important for me, when I start feeling like things are just happening to me, to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps back and really think about, what was it that I have created in the world, or manifested in the world, or desired for in the world, that has led to what is happening right now. Because there is that moment when it's happened that you choose it. And for me, it's about going back and remembering the part that I played in it as well. Because then my choice goes a little bit farther back than the now, right? And I think that creates such a sense of what happens instead then is a sense of gratitude, a sense of realization that I made this happen, right? I was able to manifest this. And then that puts me in a stronger place of choice than the feeling of, oh, this is happening to me. So I think is what's coming up for me. For example, I also have recently organized a birthday. So my story is that when November comes, I know it's going to be a very busy time of the year, because on November the 27th is my son's birthday. And then we have Advent, and then we have Christmas. And all of these events require an enormous amount of preparation in the personal space. And in addition to that, there's the office Christmas parties, there's the get-togethers with colleagues, and all of these other things that were also. So what is meant to be a joyous season of celebration almost begins to feel like a burden. And there's that piece around taking a step back and thinking to myself, well, what of this is of my doing? And I have to say, all of it is of my doing, right? I'm the one who wants to meet with all of my friends and my colleagues. I'm the one who wants to have the massive celebration of a birthday. And in realizing that I set myself up for this, and going into what was it? What was that original nugget of a dream that I had for all of these moments? I then begin to celebrate it more rather than feeling it as a burden. But it takes a little bit of recognizing the dissonance between those two things, the joy in the start of it and the feeling of madness and out of controlness when it's happening. That it takes a little bit of stopping and seeing, no, I created this. And so therefore I can celebrate this instead of feeling like it's a burden for me. And like you said, I can also then say, I choose to, right, have a simple birthday, have a simple celebration, or whatever it is, and then make that one that is of my making. Here's a tool that I suggest, and it's not a tool, it's a practice. I love yours, by the way. I love your little cards. I think that's a fabulous idea. And I'm going to steal that from you. And right here, right now, I'm going to steal that from you. Here's a practice from me. My practice is that when things start to get really busy in my heart and my head, but especially in my head, I like to take a step out and get active, because when I'm active, I get into my body rather than being in my mind. And that's super helpful in a very empowering way. So whether that's taking a very long walk, whether that's going for my kickboxing class or for my flamenco class, getting back into my body and getting out of my head, even for a 45-minute short time period, really helps to settle things down within my head, gives me the space that I need in order for me to feel re-energized, to come back to all of that busyness in a more empowered way. That's the word that we're using today. So I'm going to stop here. You said something about prioritization. Love that. So say a little bit more, and I'm going to share a little bit more about how I do that on my end.
Yeah. So before we jump into prioritization, I want to react to a couple of things that you said. So Michael Beckwith, and I love his content, he said that you can be grateful on 3 levels. Speaking of gratitude, you can be grateful for what is. You can be, so for what you already have, like, and you can be grateful. Like, I have a son for whom I am planning this birthday party. Like, what a blessing is that in itself, right? And just reflecting on that. I am overflowing with clients because I am creating value for them. What a blessing is that, right? Instead of looking at it the other way, just like you were saying. So that's level 1 of gratitude. Then there's the second level of gratitude. Be grateful for your challenges, because it is in these challenges that we still learn, grow, and turn from a caterpillar into a butterfly, and we find our wings and we learn to fly, right? So that's the second level of gratitude. And then there's this third level of gratitude, which is grateful just because. Grateful just because I am here and I have the privilege of living this day. This morning I woke up and I was like, oh my God, today is going to be a magnificent day because I have the privilege of living today. Now, I have no idea what's going to unfold today, but it's still a magnificent day because I have the privilege of living it, right? And what a blessing is that? So I love the fact that you spoke to gratitude, and I think that it's just so beautiful, and for you to align your energy and looking at it through that lens of love. I know I always talk about that, looking at it through the lens of love rather than, oh my God, there is so much chaos in my life, but this is something that I actually wanted and brought into my life, right? And I'm so grateful for it. So I love, love, love that. I wanted to talk about that. The other piece is, you spoke a little bit about control, and control is an energy of fear, right? And so when we're trying to control things, that's an energy of fear. And the fear is that the very thing that we desire won't come to fruition the way that we want it, right? And so it is when we release it is when we release the control that we do find the freedom within, and when we do step into a more empowered state, because you're like, I allow it to turn out the way that it needs to turn out, right? You kind of surrender it. So I really loved, and I wanted to react and respond to what you said, because I thought that was beautiful. We started to talk about prioritization. So yes, prioritization absolutely comes into play. You said something really interesting, and that was, you have all of these holiday parties and you have all of these events. I'm going to share with you about what I'm doing at work. Life has been very busy, and I don't want to use the word overwhelm. Life has been super busy. There's a lot happening personally and at work. So do you know what I've decided to do? I've decided that I was going to have a season celebration after January. So I'm not adding another 2-hour celebration to the calendar where I have no more space on my calendar until we go on vacation during that last week between Christmas and New Year. Like, I'm jam booked, like every minute of every day. And yesterday I was sitting and looking at the calendar and I was like, I literally can't find that 2-hour slot. I just can't. And so I said, you know what? We're going to do a season celebration in January once we're settled during the second week of January. And that's just like, I am just going to have to take it and move it and be at peace with it. So that is one thing that I've kind of like, I'm just making peace with some things not happening the way that I thought that they would at the time that they would. And I was like, listen, I was having an inner dialogue. I was like, who says it has to happen before December 25th? Can we make it happen on January 11th or January whatever 13th? And I was like, could we be okay with that? Could I be okay with that? Right? Like releasing again that control of the date. So we're gonna have it then. Like, we're gonna come back and we're gonna celebrate it then. So that was one thing that I wanted to react to. The other thing is I'm also learning to delegate even more. Like, even more. Like, I'm a pretty good delegator. But yesterday, I was meeting with my direct reports and I started talking about the holiday party. And I was like, you know what? Let's solve this together. So I empowered my team to be like, hey, like, what do we want this holiday party to be like? How much planning do I need to do? And, it was like one by one, everyone started picking up the pieces. And that was really, really awesome to see, so delegating even more. And then thirdly, obviously prioritization. I've become brutal about prioritizing. And I literally go through this mindset of what is an absolute must versus nice to have. So for example, last Friday, all of our self-assessments were due in the system by 5 o'clock. That was a must, right? Like, if I don't do this, then there are, subsequent consequences. So that to me felt like an absolute must. There were other things like planning the holiday party and etc., which felt like nice to haves. So I shifted that piece over to Monday, right? There was also a product launch that we were having, sending out a note about that. That was a must, right? So I try to identify those critical 2 to 3 things that are absolute musts that I have to get through today. And then I do my nice to haves, and my nice to haves shift to the following day. And I do this brutal level of prioritization every single morning. I look at my list, and I do this both in my personal life and in my professional life. So I'll pause here, and I really want to hear your thoughts.
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. I don't know where to begin. Here's one thing that came up for me. Oh my gosh, that is so important, so important. The way, how you said there are certain behaviors that you're mastering in order, one of them being delegation. So there's a certain competence that you have to master. Here's one from me, grace. Giving yourself grace, right? So, and a super big example of that, honestly, is the one that comes up for me. I want so very much to close out this year in a way that feels completely without any loose hanging threads closed, right? Because that just feels like the right thing to do. On December the 31st, everything should be closed out completely. And so, like you, who said, but why do I hold that as the tradition, or that, what are these must-haves or must-dos that we are desperately holding on to that we can challenge? And I have been doing a little bit of that too, and thinking about creating new traditions that don't necessarily fall in line with my traditional ways of doing things. So why must everything, all the loose threads, be completely tied up by the end of December. In service of what? And I'm beginning to realize, as it seems like you are as well, that actually a few of these things can happen at any other time. Not a birthday, obviously, needs to be done pretty much on time, but there are certain things that truly can continue beyond December the 31st, So what is that? And if you are going to go through that shift of letting things go and slide and creating these new internal traditions, give yourself grace. That doesn't make you a bad guy or any of the other things or stories you're telling yourself. That just means that you are choosing yourself and your well-being over some self-imposed or societally imposed deadline. Choose you. And I think that's what takes me to my last thought, which is a reflection of your thought when you said, what is important and what is urgent? And for those of you who are listening, because you love the tools we share with you, there is a matrix called the Eisenhower Matrix, which is exactly what Vicki is referring to. So Vicki, in her complete wisdom, and maybe unknowingly, didn't realize that she's actually referring to what is called the Eisenhower Matrix, in which it's literally 4 squares, and you can choose what is important and urgent, what is important and less urgent, and then on the top left corner, what is important. And you can choose what is more important and what is more urgent versus what is less important and what is less urgent, and the permutations and combinations of those, so that you can make better decisions about what it is you have to complete on a given deadline, right? And that way, everything else that you allow to slide, you can give yourself grace and know that you did that from a very intentional, thoughtful place. Over to you, Vicki. What's coming up?
What's coming up is I want to grab a piece of paper and draw that quadrants, because I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that this framework existed. This framework sounds brilliant, and just a really wonderful way for me to think about all the stuff that I have, right? Because right now everything's kind of like this for me, right? On these little cards and little sheets of paper and God knows what, right? But what I really love about this matrix that you mentioned is that really, like, if you can truly plot everything that you have going on into that matrix, you can start to circle very intentionally, right? In terms of like, maybe I do want to lean into something that's important but less urgent, because that's still important, right? Like, so anyways, I really love this matrix that you just shared. So yes, yes, and yes. And I love the idea of giving yourself grace, because I think it's so important for us to not judge ourselves for anything that we allow to slip by. If it's slipping by, then it's meant to slip by, and just allow it and let it flow through you. I think that's super important. And that gets into the topic of self-care, self-acceptance, just being okay with what is. I think that goes back to relinquishing control. And when you relinquish control, you're actually in a much more empowered state, because you're surrendered. You're surrendering, and you're like, I'm just going to allow it to happen, because I know it's going to happen the perfect way anyway, right? And so, and when we feel into that level of self-care, the other thing that I would also recommend is, I was listening to this guy that I love yesterday, and he said, take 1 minute out for mindfulness. And he said, take a pause and remind yourself to just take a pause, look out the window, become super present, just be within yourself. And he said, you would be amazed at how that helps you add up. And so in the last 24 hours, I've been trying to practice this. And I got to be honest with you, I only remembered to do it maybe once or twice. But the once or twice that I did do it, and I allowed myself the freedom to just take a breath in and to stare out the window and to just not feel guilty for doing that. I don't know if you feel guilty for taking a minute out for yourself, but I literally feel this tremendous guilt for being like, I could be prioritizing. I could be like, but no, like, I was like, no, I'm gonna stare out the window and I'm gonna be okay with it. So just take, like, literally time yourself for 1 minute. And this 60 seconds can truly reset you. And if you just do it maybe 2 or 3 times a day and don't put guilt on yourself for doing it, like, really enjoy the purity and the stillness of that moment, I think it's going to make a huge difference for you.
Oh,
That's where I'm at, my friend.
I love that. Just hearing you say that stilled something inside me that feels quite, yes, just feels very loved. There's a little bit inside me that's feeling very loved from that stillness and from that invitation to stillness and that permission towards stillness that you have so beautifully put on the table for our listeners. I love that. I absolutely love that. And in fact, it got me thinking. I have a wonderful colleague who I work with who recently sent me a pre-Christmas gift, because who cares about traditions, right? You don't have to send a Christmas gift on Christmas. So she sent a Christmas gift before Christmas, and it is a subscription to Headspace. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but this is exactly what I think is such a wonderful, wonderful Christmas gift, or a gift for anyone who needs a little bit of stillness in their life, a little bit of permission to meditate and allow, the space to simply be and regroup, I suppose. Yeah, what were you going to say, Vicki?
No, I was going to say absolutely. I think that is a beautiful, beautiful gift. And, in fact, this inspired me to write down an idea that I got, which is 5-minute meditations. So yesterday I felt into this idea of, I am so busy. And whenever I look for meditations, they're always like 10 minutes, half an hour. I'm like, who the hell has time like this? I don't have time like I wish I did, but I don't, right? But sometimes you do need something to reset your energy. So again, I'm plagued with the blessing of abundance of ideas. So one of the ideas that I jotted down on here is I'm going to create, I've decided, 5-minute meditations, because I genuinely feel that there are so many of us like this, right? And so the idea I got was one for the morning, one for the evening, a 5-minute walking meditation. You talked about movement and how movement just helps you reconnect with your body. So like, I can imagine myself, like, when I'm in the office, I don't take 5 minutes. I don't. Like, it's go, go, go. If I have 5 minutes, I'll make myself a cup of coffee. Like, that's what I will use that 5 minutes for. Well, what if I use 5 minutes to stare out the window? Or what if I use 5 minutes for something else, right? To just like reset my energy. So I came up with this idea. It felt like, I've connected with your body, and you talked about that connection with your body. I've really been feeling into it, and I've been going on this quest of what feels like a 10 in your body. If it feels like a 10 and it lights you up, well, that's your higher self just basically being like, yes, this is an inspired idea. This is a passion, like, go for it, right? So when this idea popped into my head yesterday, 5 for 5, I was like, this is a yes, this is a 10 in my body. And so I'm going to carve out an hour to record 5-minute meditations, and I'm just going to put it out into the world and see what happens, right? Like, it's going to be like something I'm going to try, right? So I think that this is another thing that I want to share, is that, like, when you are in a passion state and something just like feels like a 10 in your body, and you're like, this is a yes. Like, I've been like asking myself, is this a yes or is this a no? Is this a 10 or is this a 9? Is this a 5? Right? And I've been like reading how things feel in my body, not in my head. And I think that's the heart space. That heart space will tell you what lights you up. And when it lights you up, all of these other things will just naturally flow out of it, whether it's money, abundance, health, whatever it is, right? So like you do flamenco. Maybe you can share with the listeners about flamenco. And how does flamenco feel in your body, Afsheen? And are you, even though you're so busy, still doing flamenco? And if so, why? I think this is a beautiful lesson.
That's such a good question. And the answer is yes. I make time for self-care, very, very much so. And there's a reason for that. I am noticing that flamenco has just the practice of flamenco. And as I have told many people, I'm not very good at it, but the practice of flamenco has really given me a new empowered experience where my mind and my body are much more connected than they used to be. So while I'm still quite bad at flamenco, I'm actually much better at it than I was before, because the practice of it has created a stronger mind-body connection where what I ask my body to do in my head, my body actually responds and does it now. And that was not the case in the first few months. And I would like that to be that level of mastery. I believe that level of mastery is going to be something that is going to be reflected in many other ways in my work, in my personal life. Imagine having such a strong connection between what your mind asks you to do and your body is able to then actually do. Imagine that in every sphere of your life. Imagine being empowered in that space more than you were, let's say 6 months ago, by even just 20%. And you can begin to see just how important it is to do that, whatever it is that means self-care to you, and finding the meaning of it for yourself. So this is the meaning of it for me. And actually, Vicki, going back to that space around taking the 5 minutes to meditate, I love that you're incorporating that into a practice that you want to offer as a gift in the world. And I think, again, going back to taking an empowered step towards how your mind is going to react or respond in a certain situation, and exercising that muscle is so incredibly empowering. And it's not just about luxury. It's not just about selfishness. It's about becoming more empowered so you can create more value in the world, so that you can become an exponential version of you. And so if we are able to evolve our thinking around the minute of silence, or the 5 minutes of silence, or the 10 minutes of silence, and really begin to understand how that creates you and your empowerment, we might actually be willing and make the time to carve out the time to do more of it. And actually, what I do, and what I have, and I started this 2 years ago. So when I stepped into the role of executive and leadership coaching community of practice leader for the International Coaching Federation, it was 4 years ago. I automatically found myself hosting these online events during COVID for 1,000+ people who were joining these events. And that was quite harrowing. In the beginning, I had never worked in front of such a significant audience, and the topics we were covering were not just really intellectually sort of expanding, but also deep, as many coaching topics are. So to hold the space for 1,000+ people and do that effectively required from me a very conscious moment of silence before stepping into that virtual event. So a practice that I implemented for the group, because it wasn't just me who held that space, we had tech people who were holding that space with us or helping us hold that space effectively, ambassadors who were on our team. And so what I did was I instituted a 3-minute meditation just before we went into the virtual room to invite everybody to come in. And in that 3-minute of meditation, I would invite all of us to sort of go into a meditative state and invite us to imagine the impact that we wanted to have created on all of the people who were joining us by the end of the call. And so going in with the end in mind put us in the most empowered, but also a sense of stability and a strong core that everybody yearns for when things are shaky and unpredictable. So something to share.
Oh my God, Afsheen, I absolutely love that. And I love the meditation with something with the end in mind. That's beautiful because, my meditation is always like body scan or like listen to silence, right? But I think that this is another. But this is why I think you and I are an and, right? It's me taking what I'm doing plus what you just taught me, which I love, right? So I think it's absolutely an and to my practice. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so beautiful. And I know I haven't told you this, but I actually have 2 coaching students. Whenever I meet with my coaching students, I start with a meditation. So that's exactly what I do. So we start with number 1, I find that it helps reset their energy because we're going from thing to thing to thing to thing. And now this is your sacred space for an hour to really introspect, to self-reflect, and to really help transform you to another energetic state, right? And so before we do that, I really just it's almost like cleansing your palate, right? This is like that energetic palate, right? And so that's what we'll do is we'll just take a minute or 2. I walk them through a quick guided meditation. We ground ourselves, we ground our energy, we feel into our bodies, into the space that we're at. And then we go into the conversation so that we're not distracted and we can, so that the person can truly focus on themselves and the transformation that they want to experience, hopefully at the end of the session, at the end of the conversation. So that is a practice that I've started. But I also love this idea of where do we want to be? That I think is also very important too, So I love that. So I've now learned 2 things from you. I can't remember the name of the framework, but I know the
Eisenhower.
Thank you for repeating it. I've learned that, and I'm totally going to incorporate it. And I can already see taking little stickies and just putting what goes into which, and then moving the stickies around, right, depending on where I'm at. And then this beautiful meditation that you just spoke of. That's just absolutely wonderful.
I am so glad, and I'm so glad that you're feeling the value of this conversation. I know I am feeling the value of this conversation, and I think the biggest takeaway for me today is that it's really important to be mindful of whatever state of mind you are in and choose an empowered mindset. And there are so many different ways to get to that empowered mindset. Choose the one that works for you, or 2 that work for you, and then you will have the ability to create exponential value in the world, because the world needs your gifts. So that's my final thoughts. Thank you so much, Vicki, for this great conversation.
It was wonderful. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day, an amazing week. Empower yourself and step into the choices that you want to make and how you want to live. Feel into that. Love you all, guys.
Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come.